On October 2nd, 1999, at around 11:30 in the morning, two men fishing at a campsite along the Big South Trail in the Arapahoe and Roosevelt National Forest, Colorado, came across a very young boy. The sight of a lone child in the middle of nowhere immediately raised concern. However, the two fishermen noticed a group of hikers about 80 to 90 feet ahead and assumed the boy was part of that group. After a brief exchange, the child ran off in their direction. The child was 3-year-old Jared Atadero, and this was the last time anyone would see him alive. To understand how a 3-year-old found himself in such a dangerous situation, we need to take a look at the life of his father, Alan Atadero. Alan, a divorced single father, was raising his two children, Jared and his 6-year-old daughter Jocelyn. Earlier that year, Alan had become deeply involved with the Christian Singles Network, a local religious organization. By October, he was hosting 11 members of this group, along with his children, at a resort he co-owned with his brother. On the day of the incident, the children expressed a desire to visit a fish hatchery with the group. Though hesitant at first, Alan eventually agreed, as the group assured him they would only make a brief visit before returning. However, for reasons that remain unclear, the trip turned into a 15-mile hike along the Big South Trail, which began around 10 a.m. Taking two young children on such a long hike without the father's consent was the first mistake. The second, and perhaps most crucial error, was the lack of responsibility for the children's safety. The group simply assumed someone else was keeping an eye on them, but in reality, no one was. To complicate matters, the hikers split into two groups, one moving faster, the other lagging behind. This division made it nearly impossible to track the children's whereabouts. About 90 minutes into the hike, Jared interacted with the two fishermen before running off towards the group. This is where things get murky. It's unclear whether Jared was between the two groups or had already passed them. The hikers seen by the fishermen may not have even been part of the same group. Tragically, this was the moment Jared disappeared. It wasn't until 12:15 p.m. that the group realized Jared had been missing for over an hour. Panic quickly set in, and some members rushed back to the resort to inform Alan. He immediately drove to the trail, frantically shouting, "They lost my baby! They lost my baby!" Meanwhile, his resort manager filed a missing person report and alerted the rangers. The area was well traveled, and the rangers were experienced in locating missing persons. The sheriff at the time was confident they would find Jared quickly. "Absolutely," he said. "It's a child, but we should be able to find him." But as the day wore on, the situation worsened. The search lasted hours with no sign of Jared, and by nightfall, there was still no news. Things took an even darker turn when a helicopter involved in the search stalled mid-air and crashed, injuring all of its passengers. By October 7th, more than 200 searchers, 12 dog teams, professional trackers, a dive team, and a plane were all involved in the desperate effort to locate Jared or any trace of him. Yet after 5 agonizing days, there were still no leads. The search for Jared officially ended on October 8th, and the story became a major media sensation, even prompting the Colorado governor to sign the Amber Alert law into effect. But despite all the attention, Jared's case remained unsolved. That is, until June 4th, 2003, when two hikers, Gary Watts and Rob Osborne, found a tattered shirt and a sneaker about 500 feet from where Jared was last seen. Recognizing the clothing, they immediately contacted authorities. This discovery sparked a renewed search of the area, and 10 days later, searchers found a body part, what appeared to be a human skull. DNA testing confirmed the remains were indeed Jared's, and the clothing matched what he had been wearing the day he vanished. After nearly 4 years, Jared's family finally received some closure, but the mystery remained. What had really happened to him? The most straightforward theory suggests that Jared wandered off, got lost, and ultimately succumbed to the harsh conditions of the mountains. However, there are significant issues with this theory. The location where his remains were found was extremely steep and rocky, almost impossible for an adult to navigate, let alone a 3-year-old. The more likely explanation is that he was attacked by a cougar. These animals are native to the area, and while they rarely attack humans, a small child would be an easy target. Some hikers in the group reported hearing a scream around the time of his disappearance, including Jared's sister Jocelyn. If the cougar theory holds, it could explain both the scream and how Jared's remains were found so far from where he was last seen. But despite how plausible this theory seems, there are a few inconsistencies. No blood, cougar fur, or other evidence was found on Jared's clothes. Even more perplexing was the condition of Jared's sneakers. They were in excellent shape, despite having endured 4 Colorado winters. These facts cast doubt on the animal attack theory, and an even darker possibility emerges that Jared was abducted and later killed by someone else. The condition of the shoes may suggest that the abductor later scattered Jared's remains across the mountain years after the incident. While this theory is chilling, it appears to be the only one that accounts for all the strange details of the case. Sadly, despite all the evidence and theories, Jared's case remains unsolved. The truth of what happened to him may never be fully known. On March 21, 2010, the Gabarra family returned home from a trip to their residence in Mexico. That evening, the parents tucked their 2 daughters into bed, unaware it would be the last time they'd see one of them alive. The next morning, the family's nanny, Erica, went into 4-year-old Pet Gabarra Farah's room to wake her up, only to find her bed empty. Despite turning the room upside down, she couldn't find the young girl anywhere. Desperate, she alerted the children's mother, Lizette Farah. Lizette immediately contacted authorities, and they began investigating the child's disappearance. This case was unlike anything investigators had encountered. Pet had severe physical disabilities, making it impossible for her to leave on her own. Yet, there was no evidence of a break-in or abduction. It was as though she had vanished into thin air. After exhausting all leads, the Attorney General's office issued a poster detailing Pet's disappearance and distributed it across the region. Lizette's sister, Arlette, also shared photos of Pet on social media, where the story quickly went viral. The case became a national sensation. That evening, Lizette appeared on television, pleading with potential abductors to return her daughter. She promised they wouldn't press charges if Pet was left in a crowded place like a shopping center. Sadly, these efforts yielded no results. 9 days later, on March 31st, the mystery took a grim turn. Pet's lifeless body was discovered in her own room, wedged between the mattress and the bed frame. This revelation should have brought closure, but instead, it raised even more questions. How had no one noticed the child's body in the room where she was last seen? The Gabarra house had been thoroughly searched by professionals, including trained dogs, yet they missed something so crucial. Even more baffling, how had no one noticed the smell? Decomposition, even over a few days, leaves an unmistakable and overwhelming odor. A comment on YouTube about a similar experience highlights this point. I once found a body in a basement apartment during a wellness check. The smell was thick, flies were everywhere, and it stuck to everything. The person had only been dead for 3 days. This raises serious doubts about whether Pet was truly in the room for 9 days. The room wasn't sealed off after Pet's disappearance, which might explain some oversights. However, many people visited the room in the days following her disappearance, including guests who slept in the very same bed. Incredibly, Lizette even gave an interview while sitting on that bed, oblivious to the fact her daughter's body was beneath her. How could none of them have noticed? The only plausible explanation is that Pet's body wasn't in the room during the initial searches and was placed there later, possibly by someone in the family. The official coroner's report claimed that Pet had climbed onto the bed on her own and accidentally fallen headfirst into the gap between the mattress and the frame, where she suffocated before anyone found her. However, evidence contradicts this explanation. For example, Pet was wearing dark trousers with a pink giraffe pattern when her body was found, but Lizette had displayed those very same trousers during an interview days earlier, claiming they were among Pet's belongings. Even more disturbing, when authorities filmed the discovery of Pet's body, they uncovered several blood stains hidden within the bed's sheets. Some stains were as large as a soccer ball. In the video, one investigator even remarked they were beating up the kid, seemingly implicating the parents. Yet, the official report dismissed any suggestion of physical abuse and omitted any mention of the bloodstains altogether. The inconsistencies caused public outrage, leading to the resignation of Alberto Basbas, the Attorney General for the state of Mexico. From all available evidence, it appears likely there was a cover-up. Some speculate that one or both parents may have accidentally killed Pet during an episode of physical abuse, and then orchestrated a plan to hide their crime while capitalizing on the media frenzy to frame themselves as grieving parents. For such a cover-up to succeed, it's likely someone in a position of authority was complicit, Of course, this is all speculation. There's no definitive proof that Pet's parents were involved in her death, and without new evidence, we may never know the truth. 14 years later, the case remains unsolved, with no new leads or breakthroughs. Unless someone with direct knowledge decides to come forward, the mystery of what happened to Pet Gabara Farah may remain unanswered. That said, if the parents were responsible, they wouldn't be the first to harm their child and attempt to cover it up. A similar tragic case unfolds in the next story. On July 25, 1996, Jan Meadows arrived at the Rivergate Mall in Goodlettsville, Tennessee, to sell crafts at a flea market. After parking her car, she opened the back door to let her 3-year-old daughter Lucy out. Jan then walked to the passenger side to retrieve her crafts. When she returned to the other side of the car, Lucy was gone. Panicked, Jan immediately contacted mall security. They conducted a thorough search of the mall and the surrounding area, but Lucy was nowhere to be found. In the weeks following the incident, police dedicated hundreds of hours to investigating her disappearance. They interviewed 100 witnesses and relatives, followed up on numerous tips, spoke with parents of children resembling Lucy, and reviewed surveillance footage from the parking lot. Unfortunately, the surveillance footage was too distant to provide any clear clues, though it did show Jan wandering the lot, seemingly searching for someone. Despite these exhaustive efforts, investigators couldn't uncover a single lead about Lucy's whereabouts. Then, the investigation took a disturbing turn when the focus shifted to Jan herself. For context, Jan was a Korean immigrant who had separated from her husband Tom and was living with another Korean woman named Hyun S. Dai, also known as Tammy. Initially, Jan claimed she had only looked away for a few seconds when Lucy disappeared. She said she opened the car door, walked to the trunk, and by the time she returned, Lucy was gone.
And walked around to the trunk, and then the daughter disappeared.
However, a couple of weeks later, Jan changed her story. She admitted she might have been busy for 10 to 15 minutes. This was a significant difference. As the lead investigator at the time noted, if they'd known Lucy could have been alone for that long, the search efforts would have been much broader from the outset. The sudden change in Jan's story raised serious suspicions, and she became a prime suspect in her daughter's disappearance. Jan was subjected to 2 polygraph tests, failing both. After that, she became increasingly reluctant to cooperate with investigators. Around the same time, a neighbor reported seeing 3-year-old Lucy wandering outside alone early one March morning, crying and not dressed for the weather. This added another troubling layer to the case. Police also questioned Tammy, Jan's housemate, but her statements didn't fully align with Jan's version of events, making the situation even more suspicious. Despite their suspicions, police and the FBI conducted extensive searches of Jan's home, farm, and the surrounding area, but found no concrete evidence against Jan or Tammy. With no leads, the case went cold and remained unsolved for 18 years. Then, in November 2004, a witness came forward with shocking claims. This individual reported seeing Lucy lying on the floor of her home, wrapped in a blanket and appearing lifeless, a day before her supposed disappearance. While the police never disclosed the identity of this witness, many believe it was Tammy's son Daniel, who was 11 years old at the time of Lucy's disappearance. If Daniel's testimony is accurate, it unravels much of the mystery surrounding Lucy's case. It suggests Lucy may have been dead before the alleged abduction on July 25th. If true, Jan likely disposed of Lucy's body and fabricated the story of her disappearance to cover up what really happened. As for who was responsible for Lucy's death, it could have been Jan, Tammy, or both. The cause of her death remains unclear, with possibilities ranging from extreme neglect to physical abuse. Sadly, without further evidence, there's no way to know for certain. If Jan and Tammy have managed to keep the truth hidden for more than 28 years, it's unlikely they'll confess anytime soon. Even so, the case remains open. Perhaps one day, another witness will come forward and shed light on what truly happened to Lucy Meadows. Until then, the mystery endures.
Come crawl to mommy. Come here. Come here, gorgeous.
These are the warm, loving words heard in the first home video Florida couple Steve and Marlene Eisenberg recorded of their nearly 5-month-old daughter, Sabrina. What they didn't know at the time was that this short clip would also serve as the last footage of their baby girl. The following day, November 23, 1997, was like any other for the Eisenberg family. They spent the evening watching a Disney movie with their 3 kids before tucking them into bed. Marlene checked on Sabrina around midnight, ensuring she was sound asleep before heading to bed herself. But the following morning would shatter their lives forever. As Marlene got up and walked through the house, she noticed something alarming.
And as I turn around and I look and notice my laundry room door out to my garage is opened. And then as I get closer, I'm looking now out to the street and seeing that my garage door is up. So now I'm just looking straight out to the street.
Marlene's heart raced as she realized something was terribly wrong. She immediately ran to Sabrina's bedroom, the closest room to the garage.
I ran into the first bedroom, which is Sabrina's room, and I look in the crib and Sabrina's gone. And I scream.
Her anguish is painfully evident in the haunting 911 call she made shortly after the discovery.
911. I need the police. My baby's been kidnapped. Alright, ma'am, need to calm down. Okay. Alright, take a deep breath. What do you think your baby's been kidnapped? I just got up to wake my son up. My garage door was wide open. My house and my door was wide open and my baby's gone out of the crib. How old is your baby? My baby is 5 months old. Oh God, help me.
Marlene and Steve later realized that Sabrina's disappearance was partially due to an oversight. They had forgotten to close the garage door the previous night. The realization made their already immense guilt even heavier. Police were called to the scene, and what followed was one of the largest manhunts in Florida history at the time. Investigators found a few potential clues in Sabrina's room: a small, unidentified footprint and some fingerprints near her crib. These discoveries seemed to support the idea that someone had entered the home and abducted the baby. But as the investigation progressed, the police struggled to find additional evidence that could lead them to a suspect. The trail quickly went cold, and the focus of the investigation shifted inward to the Eisenbergs themselves. The idea of a stranger walking into a suburban home at night, quietly abducting a baby and leaving undetected seemed far-fetched to authorities. "It's unusual for a stranger abduction," one official explained at the time. "A lot of times, it turns out to be someone the family knew or had knowledge of." Soon, Steve and Marlene were no longer grieving parents in the eyes of the police. They were suspects. Both parents were summoned for multiple grueling interviews. Investigators also requested that they take polygraph tests. While Steve passed, Marlene's results came back inconclusive. According to experts, the stress she was under likely skewed the results. Unfortunately, this only added to the mounting suspicion against her. In an attempt to help the investigation, police encouraged Marlene to make a public plea for Sabrina's return. However, the televised appearance did not go as expected.
Please bring our baby back to us. She needs her mother and her father, and we all miss her and love her very much, and we need her to come home to us, please.
It backfired because the perception was that they were cold.
Marlene was seen by some as being not authentic, unemotional. Law enforcement seemed to focus in on that display.
It took all the strength that I had to say what I said, and then the minute I was done, I broke down in tears. Okay, hysterical. But of course the cameras were not put on me then.
As public perception turned against the Eisenbergs, they decided to hire an attorney and stop cooperating directly with police. This decision only fueled suspicion further. On December 12, 1997, law enforcement obtained a warrant to install hidden listening devices in the Eisenberg home. For nearly 3 months, these devices recorded over 2,600 conversations. Police claimed these recordings revealed incriminating statements by the couple, including alleged admissions to killing Sabrina. One transcript reportedly featured Marlene saying to Steve, "The baby's dead and buried. It was found dead because you did it. The baby's dead, no matter what you say." To which Steve allegedly replied, "Honey, there was nothing I could do about it. We need to figure out how to beat the charge." Another transcript reportedly captured Steve saying, "I wish I hadn't harmed her. It was the cocaine." Authorities used these recordings to justify breaking into the Eisenbergs' home and arresting them. However, when the case went to court, the supposed evidence quickly unraveled. The judge reviewing the tapes found the audio nearly indecipherable and ruled that the alleged statements could not be conclusively verified. With no other evidence to support the charges, the case against Steve and Marlene fell apart. Adding insult to injury, the Eisenbergs filed a countersuit and won a settlement to cover their legal fees. From my own research into the case, I find it highly unlikely that Steve and Marlene were involved in Sabrina's disappearance. The couple had no prior history of neglect or abuse, and their grief appeared genuine. One of their former neighbors also defended them in a YouTube comment. "I lived about half a mile from the Eisenbergs at the time. We also had a 6-month-old baby, and I moved his crib into our bedroom after this happened. Personally, I don't believe they did it. They were wonderful parents and a normal family. My heart goes out to them." As years passed, public interest in Sabrina's case waned. However, her parents never gave up hope. They continued to celebrate her birthday each year, holding on to the belief that one day she might return home. Sabrina would have turned 25 this year. Tragically, it remains unclear whether she is alive or if she met a grim fate all those years ago. In the end, while the police focused on blaming Steve and Marlene, the real perpetrator slipped further and further away. Now, more than 27 years later, the mystery of Sabrina Eisenberg's disappearance remains unsolved.